I'm Dane Rose, and to my mind, Byron Katie, an author, speaker, healer of depression over the past 40 years, is the single most interesting person on the planet. And I'm interested in Byron because she exudes joy, innocence, energy, service, and freedom. So these are all qualities that are, if we translate it into Lazaris lingo, highly successful and very fun, right? So Byron Katie has more fun and more success on a number of metrics than any person I know or am intimate with. And so I'm fascinated with Byron Katie at the moment, and I'm experiencing roughly 30% additional well-being as a result of the time that I spend doing the work, which consists of writing an email to myself, looking at things and following her protocol. Now, for those not familiar with Byron Katie, who became, somewhat known with her first book, Loving What Is, she, entered a state of deep depression for roughly 10 years, could barely function, became an addict, checked into a halfway house, and regardless of her outer success and work with money and success as a business owner, she just collapsed under the weight of her own depressing thoughts. And she kind of transcended this state in a miraculous moment where, as she was waking up in response to a cockroach crawling over her leg as she was sleeping on the floor in this halfway house, a liminal state emerged just between waking and sleeping, and she watched her mind go from the state of no-thing, of no language, right, of complete and utter connection and unification with all things, right? Because before language, the world is one, right? We start with one. And then with the illusion of language, we cut the one into pieces, polarizing pieces, black and white, up and down. We create polarity with language, which is the foundation of all thought, which is the foundation of most of what we consider awareness or consciousness in Western culture. It is awareness through the lens of language, of the pieces of the one carved up with words, right? The knife of distinction, right? We carve the vastness of what is into one, into two, into three, into four. But these cuts, as illusionary as they are the lens through which we look at a now divided world. And she watched her mind construct the world that she knew around her with language, understanding that it didn't exist before it was put into words, and before those words served as a grid to look through. And what that looks like geometrically is you start with one, right? This is the uninterrupted whole. This is reality. This is the interconnected ecology. This is the synergy. This is all that is, right? This is God, Goddess, all that is before it's carved up into language, right? And then we insert knives. We insert concepts. We say that this is the left, right, and this is the right, right? We say that. It's not true. but when we believe it, it appears that way, right? And then we carve the Earth up into latitude and longitude. Now, you can say this and that, right? This latitude, that longitude, and it sounds like it's different. But, of course, you don't get to say that this cube that is created by language really exists as separate from another box in the illusionary cubes, any more than you can say that this fingernail is different from this fingernail. Like that's the game that the mind plays. The mind plays says, this is my left fingernail, this is my right fingernail. And it talks as if the fingernail is somehow a distinct object, a distinct particle. But of course, there is no exact location between the finger and the fingernail. Right? If you pull the nail out, right, you can say this is the nail and this is the finger. Right? But you've changed the finger and the nail in the process. And you can say that this finger is a separate finger, but it doesn't function without the hand that holds it. You can say this is a separate hand, but it doesn't function without the wrist. You can say it's a separate wrist. You can say it's a separate elbow, but the elbow does not work without the wrist and the upper arm, doesn't work without the shoulder, doesn't work without the veins, doesn't work without the oxygen, that doesn't work without the trees, that doesn't work without the ancestors, which doesn't work without the iterations of ancestors and animals that emerged into ancestors. You can follow the thread of this fingernail all the way back to the Big Bang that may or may not have happened. You can follow this moment in time back to the original moment and to the last moment. You can follow the probability of this moment to the probabilities to the left of it, to the right of it, to the up and below. There is no partition between this fingernail and all that is, other than in our minds, right? And words are the knives that cut the unity, the synergy of all that is into illusionary boxes that leave us feeling separate, and also, by the way that we cut up the boxes, leave us feeling stuck and unable to move from one box to the other. Once we decide we're a bad person, how do we move to become a good person? We get stuck in the tangled web of our own illusions. And in a moment of insight, Katie broke through all those barriers and saw, right, that everything was, and nothing existed until she believed the illusion of her mind. And thus the cosmic joke, thus the transcendence from 10 years of depression in which she believed all the repetitive thoughts that were given to her, were spoon-fed her by her parents, by her cult, her culture, and saw that none of it was real, that what was there was boundless joy. And in integrating this into her life and in bringing her life into integrity with this realization, she found that she needed to question, she needed a protocol to question the thoughts that otherwise poured into the vacuum as fodder for the ego's identification. The ego, the I, that identifies, that holds on to a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, that egos cling to desperately and try to preserve their pattern, right? Identification with this structure, and this is me, and everything else that threatens my pattern is an enemy. Right? So once the I has attached itself to a form, to a pattern, It views itself as separate from the interconnected ecology out of which it emerges, out of which it emerged, and then goes to battle with all that is, trying to defend its form, its rigid form that it is convinced, right, that is linked to its survival. Like the ego can't survive if this belief doesn't survive. The ego can't survive if this thought doesn't survive. So the ego's job then is to look for validation, to look for affirmation that it is right, it is correct, that its view of things is the only logical and sane view that could ever be come up with, right? Which is somewhat absurd in the long span of history, where we understand that there have been more than 10,000 distinct cults, distinct cultures, distinct languages. And every single cult in human history, every single language has its own belief system, right? The earth was born out of a toad's belly that was wrought on the fire of this, and it's all a story. Every cult has had its own story, its own beliefs, its own thoughts that have given rise to traditions, to paradigms, right, to cultures. And every cult has told its children that this is the only way to see things. Right? The world was born on a blue dot, married to a white dot that then swam into the tummy of a whale. That's the only way to look at things, right? God did create the world in 7 days and did this, and it's the only rational thing, right? Shiva did do this, right? It's the only possible way. Just do it the way that we do it, right? This is the tradition. This is the cult. It's this way because it is this way, and because it is this way, it is this way, right? And because it is this way because it was that way, right? And it was that way because that was the only way, the right way. It's a self-referential loop, right, which creates the cocoon of the cult, the blinders, out of which we fear to face the vast chaos of the unknown, the truth that we made it all up, that we could have made up another trillion stories, but we made up this one. And we're so fragile. We're so fragile in our isolated illusion of ego, right? It's a very fragile illusion because science shows that all things are connected. We rest upon a reality in which all things are one, operating within the illusion that we're distinct and separate, right? So it's a very difficult illusion to maintain, and it becomes even more difficult to maintain the illusion when we're around very different people who see things very differently, right? So we try to get rid of them, right? Because our illusion is in jeopardy. And so a cockroach, right? A wonderful irony, those lowly creatures we all fear. A cockroach led to the birth of reality, to the transcendence of the illusion, and to a process where Katie began to ask five questions about every thought, about every belief, to reduce its seriousness, to bring it back to the point of fluidity where we understand that we are the one telling the story, writing the story, and we can change it. We can, in a sense, create our own reality. So Byron's personality, physique, lifestyle, purpose, memory, radically transformed in this transcendent state, and she began to explore the work, which is, in her words, very simple. You take any situation that bothers you, and you look at the thoughts that are at war with that situation. Right? My mother should love me more than she does. That's a thought at war with reality, right? Our mother loves us exactly as much as she does in that particular moment. When we overlay that it should be different than it is, right? We are putting stress, we're putting reality under attack, right? To say that basically God got us all that is should be different. This is what is, and this is our thought of what should be, right? We want to play a superior role to God got us all that is. This is reality, right? Reality is our mother is doing this and this and this. That's what she's doing. That's reality. She exists as part of God got us all that is. And the superiority comes in as we say that the world that our mother should be different than it is. Right? And that it is the fault of whatever it is that is the way it is, that it is the fault of that person or that thing, that it is not the way that we decide it should be. In other words, we're putting ourselves above God, above Goddess, above all that is. We're separating from God got us all that is, judging God got us all that is, whatever portion of it we're focusing on, and saying it should be better than it is, right? It should be different than it is. The plan is not good enough, right? It's not good enough. It should be better. And in doing so, we ostracize ourselves, right? In order to judge, we create a partition. We ostracize ourselves in a state that is incapable of loving, right? It is impossible to separate from all that is, compartmentalize parts of all that is, judge those parts, have nothing to do with us, right? As inferior to our way of looking at things. And that we have become masters as egos in the illusion of separation, in the illusion of being able to judge, and in the illusion of superiority, right? That we are better than, or less than, but we are apart from all that is, that we are a part of, we are separate from what we are critiquing, what we are judging. And that this is the source of all loneliness, all fear, all pain, all depression, all rage, right? That we pretend to be separate from, we pretend to be isolated from all that is. And we pretend to be better or less than all that is. So that is the step into the illusion, the step into suffering, the step into pain. And Katie's journey was to understand that to love what is, to accept and love what is, neither being better than or less than, was the pathway home, was the path to freedom. And so understanding that the ego's foundation is the illusion of separation, is the creation of suffering by believing thoughts that separate us. The work to come back home, the work to come to joy, is the work of questioning the thoughts that isolate us from reality. So, right, so we pick something that we judge, that we criticize. They shouldn't be that way. I shouldn't be that way. I am this way, but I shouldn't be that way, right? We're trying to say that there's this distinct ego that is somehow separate from us. We pick an area that we are in separation, that we are in suffering, that we are in loneliness. And the first question we ask is it true? Is it true? Is this thought true? And the ego's job is to say, yes, of course it's true. I've got all this data, right? And so, of course it's true. It's the only way to look at, right? Of the 10,000 cults in human history, the 10,000 cultures that anthropologists are familiar with, there is not a single cult that says to its children, we're full of it. We just made that up about the universe being created by a white dot eaten by a blue dot, in the whale's tummy. We just made that up. We just made that up about the Son of God and the this. We made that up. And not only that, but statistically speaking, all of these billions of people who have been with a straight face passing on this shit to their kids, they've all said this is the only way to look at it. And 95% of all cultures are extinct, meaning there used to be 10,000 over time, but now there's only 500. There's, used to be. So there's a 95% statistical probability that over a 30,000 year period, 95% of all the stories parents and teachers and stuff are telling to their kids will not only be laughable, they'll be extinct, right? Whatever you're believing, whatever your parents and school and cult is telling you, give it 30,000 years. And 95% of whatever it is that's being fervently believed will be forgotten, outdated, absurd, criticized by people who have invented a new story, right? That 30,000 years later will all be extinct, forgotten, etc., right? So, in other words, you're dealing with whatever comes out of your mouth, whatever comes out of your cult, your memes, your story, has a 99.9% probability of being utter nonsense. That's going to be completely irrelevant. Before it was made up, like 5,000 years ago, it would sound like complete nonsense. Tell someone 5,000 years ago, this is the way, everyone needs a cell phone. What? Nonsense, right? Tell someone 10,000 years from now when we need a cell phone? It's ridiculous, right? These truths that we hold so dearly to only seem real to a majority for a brief moment in time before they no longer make any sense, often to the extent that we don't even know these 10,000 cultures. Why? Well, we know that they're not important. We know our story is important. So what Katie's doing with the work is unraveling the attachment we have to our illusions of separation, to our thoughts, to the feelings produced by those thoughts, to our beliefs that we hang on those thoughts. And the first question in the 5 questions is it true? My mother should love me more than she does. Is it true? The ego, of course it's true. Look, like the ego's job is to validate its position in as many ways as possible, and there's always evidence that supports any position. And you just have to look. You just have to have the intention, and you'll find the evidence. So, of course, it's true, right? The next question is, can you absolutely know that it's true? Can you absolutely know with certainty that it's true that your mother should love you more than she does, more than she did. Right? It comes to that old story, right? The father sent his 2 sons out in the field on horseback, and the horses threw the sons, and both of them broke their legs. Oh, the neighbors were filled with pity, right? Oh, what, both your sons. Oh, what a tragedy, right? Next week, the military comes in and takes all the able-bodied young men to the front lines that can fight. And only the 2 sons with the broken legs are spared. Well, the neighbors come by, oh, you're so lucky, right? You're so lucky they were spared, right? Let's see, right? But then, right, then this other thing, it just goes back and forth, right? It goes back and forth. What's lucky on one end is costly on another end, right? It's beneficial here, right? You're so lucky, your daughters are so beautiful, right? But in a cult that worships beauty, they become spoiled and unhappy, right? Attracted and addicted to too much outer validation, which then turns to confusion and depression in middle age as those looks are faded, right? That wonderful blessing, you were born into a rich family, right? But is it really such a blessing if you look at the children of rich, right? So it's that similar thing that the one becomes the other, the one becomes the other. Can you absolutely know that it's true? Right? Maybe you have more empathy for other people because you were so lonely in the absence of motherly love. An addict can give less love than someone who's present to themselves, but maybe you understand things that you wouldn't understand without an addictive mother, right? Can you really know that it's true? That the best thing for all of reality, can you really know that you have a better plan than God got us all that is for how things should work? The supposition of every should is that I know better than God, than reality, than everyone else. Can you absolutely know that it's true? The next question is, when you believe the thought, my mother didn't love me adequately, who do you become? How do you feel? What happens to your body posture? What's your attitude? Who do you see yourself as? Right? I feel resentful. I feel self-pity. I feel this. I feel angry. It's unfair. They got a nice mother. I didn't. I feel bitter. I feel cynical. It's not fair. Right? God likes them, not me. Right? So who do you become when you believe the thought? Is the next question. And who would you be if you didn't believe the thought? The thoughts are still there. They're given to you by your cult. Thoughts have been flowing through the airwaves, for hundreds of thousands of years, right? They're all the same recycled thoughts just blowing by. But when you attach yourself, when you identify, when the I attaches itself and says, that's me, and defines itself by that thought, believes the thought, yes, I believe it. Who would you be if you didn't believe it? If you didn't believe that I should have been loved more by my mother, that my mother didn't love me enough, who would I be if I didn't believe that thought? Just right here in the present moment, who would I be now if I didn't believe that thought? I can't make it in life because I didn't get enough love. Who would you be without that thought? If you just didn't believe it. There's a thought, but I'm not going to I'm not going to identify with it. Is there any reason to keep the thought? That's right. Is there any reason that brings about well-being to anyone to keep that thought? And finally, what are ways that the opposite is true? Right? What are ways that the opposite is as true? Right? My mother loved my brother better. My mother should have loved me more. My mother didn't love me. What are ways that the opposite is true? My mother did love me enough that I'm alive. My mother gave me some food. My mother didn't kill me. My mother, right, paid a bill and gave us electricity. Right? So my mother didn't love me enough. My mother did love me enough for reality to exist, enough for me to be here. And there are 3 reasons that it was enough. Right? Then turn it around, look at other opposites. Right? My mother didn't love me enough. I didn't love my mother enough. Right? If she's such a crappy mother, things get better with love. So if she's such a crappy mother and she's still such a crappy mother and we're blaming her, what a crappy mother. I don't love my mother enough. I'm still holding on that she's a crappy mother. I'm blaming her, blaming and holding on to all her faults. That's not love. Right? She didn't love me enough. I didn't love her enough for her to blossom into becoming a great mother. She didn't love me enough. I'm still blaming her for all the problems that I have. So why not blame ourselves for all the problems she has? Right? In other words, what we're doing is we're loosening up the polarity. We've held on to this extreme here, so we're going to the opposite so that we have space to emerge out of the middle, to understand that the opposites are both equally true. I didn't love my mother enough. I didn't understand her. I didn't know her problems to help her with her addiction. I was scared of her rather than being present for her. And if she should have been able to change and suddenly become more loving, then why can't I suddenly change and become more loving to my mother? My mother didn't love me enough. I didn't love myself enough. Right? I'm still holding on to my mother. That's not self-love. That's an addiction. An addiction isn't self-love. My mother didn't love me enough. I didn't love myself enough. You look for all the possible opposites, right? She didn't love me enough. I didn't love her enough. I didn't love me enough. She did love me enough. Look at the ways that that's true. She did love me enough. Right? I didn't love myself enough. Right? I didn't do this, this, and this, and this. Is there any reason to hold on to this belief that doesn't cause more suffering? If not, let it go. So this is Byron Katie's work, and I find it remarkable. So I just write down my various grievances and my various judgments, and then go through those questions. Also, right, another step in that process is to give advice, right? My mom should stop drinking. She should stop smoking. She should acknowledge and apologize for her failings. She should make amends to my younger siblings. She should, give up on certain delusions. She shouldn't be so isolated. She should do this. She should go to this seminar or that seminar. She should read this book. So these are the prescription, right? We know best, of course. And so this is what mom should do to fix her problem. So we also do the questions on that advice. Is it true? Can we know that that's true? How do we feel when we think mom should read this book and she won't read the book? You give it to her and she's not reading it. How do you feel? How do you feel, right? When that's who would you be if you didn't believe? If you believed that she was perfectly well doing her job, being a mean drunk, and that's the way the universe needs some mean drunks around for something or other. She's doing it perfectly. She's a wonderful mean drunk. Who would you be if you gave up the whole story. And then the turnarounds. I should read this book and actually pay attention rather than criticize everyone else for not reading the book, right? I should stop smoking my drug of blame, right? I should stop drinking my drink of self-pity. She should give up her addiction. I should give up my addiction to codependently managing her life, right? So these are the opposites, right? Well, if she should be able to do that, I should be able to do it, right? And if I can't do it, we'll get to work, right? So these are, I would say, they're wonderful tools, meaning I'm experiencing roughly 30% more additional well-being as I actively live in these questions and these ideas in a daily practice that takes 10 minutes to an hour, depending on how complex I want to go into, all the different sub-stories and parts of it. But it's free. thework.com, byronkatie.com, all of these techniques and all the worksheets and stuff, it's all free. Byron's been donating her time in prisons, in mental institutions, and with juvenile delinquents, people with addictions, schools. Right? She makes this work available as freely as possible to as many people as possible. And in one study, 100% with people with terminal depression who went into her 9-day event came out with no depression. 100% cure by questioning the lies that created the depression in the first place, right? So this, I think, was a Stanford study. That's unbeatable, right? Lazaris does not have a track record where 100% of people who listen to the depression red label series or whatever come out not depressed. Right, so 100% success rate for people that actively do that work in community and in the workshop by a objective third party. And I think there is a role for statistics and objective third parties, and I think it's a good it's remarkable, basically. Which gets down to the bottom line: do I want to be right or do I want something that works? And there we have some convergence with Lazaris. Lazaris says all beliefs are wrong, so pick the ones that work, right? The belief that doing this work leads to less depression is a belief that works, right? If you do the work with that in mind, statistically speaking, depression goes down. Right, so we have lots of convergence with the Lazaris material, and we have lots of divergence with the Lazaris material. Lazaris says that complexity correlates with ease. Byron Katie says that simplicity correlates with ease, right? Just do these 5 questions on anything, and your life will get better. Very simple, right? So complexity correlates with ease, simplicity correlates with ease. Try to replace this belief with that belief, right? Try to just let go of the beliefs that aren't working. Question them, let go of them. So there's lots of divergence between Lazaris and Byron Katie. I think one of the biggest convergence is in the body of material. Lazaris has given over 1,000 different paths, saying, do this and your life will get better. Do this and your life will get better. Lazaris has created a vast amount of complexity that can lead to overwhelm, meaning there's times in my life where, which tape? What do I can't do it all. I can't do this, I can't do that. I can't do it all. I can't work with my child, work with my adolescent, work with my negative ego, then go and open up the positive future, then go and do this. And it's not working right. It's not enough time to do all the different Lazaris techniques. Right? So that's on the Lazaris side. On the Byron Katie side, there's 5 questions. Takes 10 minutes an hour on anything that isn't working. And, right, and does anyone not have time to ask 5 questions sometime in the next week, right? And so it's, its simplicity is grace, its complexity is grace, right? And obviously, if you believe the Lazaris things are better, does that create suffering or does that work for you? If you believe the Byron Katie thing works better, does that create suffering or does that work for you, right? Question the beliefs, question the thoughts that cause suffering. That's it, right? All suffering is the mental overlay of an illusionary map created with language. So for anyone who hasn't done the work with Byron Katie, you want to try it, download a free worksheet on thework.com or just use the questions I do. I don't use her worksheets. I just type in the questions, then type in my grievance and work with it and enjoy noticing how my body changes, how my future changes, how my resonance changes. And the biggest change for me is I was very aware over the last few years. I had a traumatic event with a therapist, which, I absolutely, I thought I might die. I thought all kinds of things, and I didn't know what to believe, and clung on to them. And to the degree that I clung on to my thoughts, I became very small, very paranoid, very disconnected from myself and the world. As I question those things, I come back to presence, back to the transcendent self that is beyond words, that is beyond beliefs, and that doesn't need anything or anyone to change in order to be present to the grace of God, Goddess, all that is. And that is something that Byron facilitates magnificently. She's all over YouTube. And so, right, if it works, right, go for it. If it doesn't, do whatever works better. For right now, this is working more than anything I'm familiar with. And as a result of the efficiency, just watching people pivot, people from Nazi concentration camps pivoting to freedom in 10 minutes, that's a grace. That's a level of grace, a level of effectiveness, a level of beauty that I don't know anywhere else. Tony Robbins has some of that in terms of effectiveness, but there's also a lot of fear and manipulation and all of that is part of that role, right? So, Tony can switch people around but not with quite as much grace and innocence, right? I don't know anyone else who's doing it. It's beautiful to see and love to hear how it works for you.